The weeks following Mary's funeral. The days after Mary's burial stretched long and gray, blending together like the endless sheets of snow that covered the land. The house, once filled with small but steady sounds of life, the crackling of a fire, the scrape of a spoon against a bowl, the murmur of Ingrid's voice, humming lullabies to the children, had grown unbearably silent. Ingrid did not speak. She moved through the days like a shadow, a ghost of herself. She did what was needed, stoking the fire, cooking meals, milking the cow that had survived the drought, but there was something mechanical about it, something vacant. She did not look Eric in the eyes anymore. She did not sing to the children. She barely touched Johann, their youngest, when he reached for her. She was slipping away. The first time Eric realized something was truly wrong was one night, perhaps a week after the funeral. He woke to the sound of the wind rattling the walls, the embers in the hearth casting a faint, flickering glow across the cabin. He turned over, expecting to find Ingrid curled beside him beneath the heavy wool blankets. But she was gone. At first, he thought she had gone to the fire. Maybe she was just restless. Maybe she needed warmth. But then he sat up and his stomach tightened. The door to the cabin was slightly ajar, with snowflakes drifting in, melting against the wooden floor. Eric threw off the covers and grabbed his coat and stepped out into the cold. And there she was. She was standing barefoot in the snow, wearing only her thin night dress, with her long, dark hair whipping in the wind. Ingrid! His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. She did not turn. She was looking up at the sky, her arms wrapped around herself, her breath rising in pale wisps. Ingrid, come inside. He took a step forward, his heart pounding. She swayed slightly, tilting her head. Do you hear her? Eric froze. His breath came in short, sharp bursts, fogging in the air between them. What? Ingrid? Said Eric. She finally turned her head, her dark eyes wide, almost feverish. Baby Mary. Her voice was a whisper. She's crying. A chill ran through him that had nothing to do with the cold. Ingrid, there's nothing. Hush, she lifted a hand, her face twisted in frustration. She's cold, Eric. She needs me. Eric felt the tightness in his throat, the heaviness pressing down on his chest. He took another step forward, reaching for her hand. Her fingers were like ice. Ingrid, he said gently, pulling her towards him. Mary is gone. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then something shifted in her face. Her lips trembled, her breath hitched, her entire body sagged against him, her forehead pressing into his chest. I don't know where she is, she whispered, so softly that he almost didn't hear her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, shielding her from the wind. She's with God, he murmured. She's safe. Ingrid said nothing. She let him lead her back inside. She let him wrap her feet in warm rags. She let him hold her beneath the heavy blankets, but she did not sleep. Neither did Eric. The children began to notice. Elise was the first to say something. "Papa," she whispered one morning, as Eric shoveled snow from the path leading to the barn. "Mama scares me." Eric's chest tightened. He set the shovel down and crouched in front of her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Elise hesitated, twisting her fingers in the hem of her coat. She doesn't look at me anymore." Her voice wavered. "Sometimes she whispers to herself. She says Mary's name. She left the porridge out all night." Eric swallowed hard. A few nights before, he had found a small bowl of milk set near the hearth, covered with a cloth. When he had asked Ingrid about it, she had barely looked at him. "It's for Mary," she had said. He had not known what to say. It was a little over 2 weeks after the funeral when Ingrid truly broke. The day had been bitter, the wind sharp enough to slice through clothing. Eric had spent the morning hauling firewood, his muscles aching from the cold. He had just stepped outside when he heard it. Soft singing. At first he thought it was Elise, but no, it was coming from the rocking chair by the fire. It was Ingrid. She was cradling something in her arms, her body swaying so slightly. Her voice was low, almost hypnotic, singing the lullaby she had sung to Mary the night she was born. But there was nothing in her arms. Eric felt his breath leave his body. "Ingrid?" His voice was hoarse. She didn't stop singing. He stepped closer. "Ingrid!" She looked up then. He would never forget the emptiness in her eyes. "She's sleeping," Ingrid whispered. A deep, terrible sorrow gripped Eric's chest. He knelt in front of her, his hands shaking as he reached out. Slowly, he brushed his fingers against her arms, against the nothingness that she was holding. There was no child. There was no baby Mary. Only grief. Tears burned behind Eric's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Instead, he gently took her hands in his own, pressing his forehead against them. "Ingrid," he murmured, his voice thick with anguish. "She's not here." For a long moment she didn't move. But then something inside her seemed to snap. A strangled sob tore from her throat. The invisible bundle in her arms slipped from her grasp, and she collapsed against him, her body shaking with a grief so raw, so all-consuming, that Eric thought it might swallow them both whole. He held her. He whispered her name over and over, as if trying to pull her back from whatever place her mind had gone. But deep down he knew that she had already begun to drift away, and he didn't know if she would ever return.